I'm Mike Brofman, and welcome to Song and Wine, Brooklyn Art Song Society's web series where we drink wine and discuss the music. We're back at our normal angle. We had some technical difficulties last time. We were using a different camera, but we are back and better than ever at our proper sitting position. I'm joined today with tenor Dominic Armstrong. We are half of a quartet, I guess, of performers on the December 1st free concert at the Brooklyn Public Library.
Technically a quintet.
Oh yes, we have. There's four singers, 4 musicians, and 1 actor.
Right.
We'll get to that. We are performing at December 1st at the Brooklyn Public Library, the main branch at Grand Army Plaza in the Dweck Auditorium. It's a Sunday at 4 p.m. It's a free concert, so you should probably get there around 3:30 if you really want to make sure you have a seat. And on this performance, we are performing the great song cycle by Johannes Brahms, Die Schöne Megalona, which is Opus 33, a collection of 15 songs. And we're doing it in a rather unique way. And usually it's done just one singer, but we are adding multiple voices. We have Dominic and I will be joining him at the piano. Then we have the baritone John Brancy, who will be singing the other half of the cycle with his accompanist Peter Dugan. And we also have a guest narrator, actor Ty Jones, who's a phenomenal Shakespearean actor, who will be reading excerpts from the novella which the texts come from, which is a kind of a crazy knight in shining armor type of story. So that's all the details you need to know, and I guess we can begin.
Cheers.
So my first question for you, Dominic, and you've sat with this cycle for a while now. This is something you're familiar with.
I started learning this song cycle in 2007, I guess. Yeah, so it's been with me for a while.
So you've sat with it. So
yeah.
What would you say is your favorite element of Brahms? Brahms is a style. He's one of those composers where it's just like you hear him on, you turn on the radio, you don't have to know what the piece is, you hear it for 3 seconds. And go,
right.
Of course it's Brahms.
Yeah.
What do you think makes Brahms Brahms?
Well, I think we were discussing this actually the other day when we were rehearsing. Really the texture is really what makes Brahms Brahms. Mm-hmm. And it's such a beautifully thick, syrupy texture. It's almost, I think we were saying what it was, or at least I was saying it was a mix maybe between Schumann and Schubert or something like that. It's sort of gooey thickness to the whole thing.
It has a certain roundness and warmth to it on top of thickness. It's like it's like some sort of like rich chocolatey kind of.
Right, which I suppose is kind of perfect for these ballads because I mean the text is similar in its thickness.
They're very hard on the sleeve. It's interesting. The texts that inspired Brahms are kind of They are very overtly emotional texts.
And from what I've read about it, I mean, Ludwig von Tieck is the author, and this story was Brahms's favorite story growing up as a child. Mm-hmm. And I think he also, wasn't there some woman involved as well? I think it was his cousin, in fact. Yeah. Somehow all these German composers have a thing for their cousins.
Mozart had
it.
I think there was less of somehow that didn't become taboo until a little later.
Right.
I don't think it was like actively encouraged, but I don't think it was frowned upon.
Well, and never are we reading that they're enacting on these feelings. They're just they have some sort of enamored sense of their cousin or some relative. Anyway, so he really loved these ballads all the time, and so for Brahms this was sort of a childhood project from then and then into his adulthood.
And this really, I think this work is the sort of pinnacle of Brahms' youthful period. I think it's his high masterpiece in that basically, probably from Opus 1 to around here, maybe up to like Opus 40, maybe up to I would say probably his middle period if you want to do the whole Beethoven middle late analysis goes up to about the German Requiem, I think. By then he's sort of pretty solidly in his middle established, confident in his own voice. But I think this is really you know, and what people, it's funny is, I think, you know, there's basically the iconic picture of Brahms that we use for our festivals. It's basically like Santa Brahms,
right?
You know, sort of fat with the big beard.
The Moondog Brahms.
And that was Brahms when he was older. But if you see pictures of Brahms when he was young, he was quite like dashing.
Oh, I
imagine so. He had this
so.
sort of long hair, and he was very muscular and thin, and
right.
He was quite like a handsome person, and so that is more to me the Brahms of this song cycle.
Yeah.
Kind of young love and romance.
Well, everything is so idealized. I mean, it's all so like, I love you this much. I mean, there's no question about how much this character loves Magalona. I mean, he's gushing the entire time, and I think deep down in Brahms, that was probably, I mean, speaking for a dead man, I suppose, but he seemed like the type who was like all in all the time.
Yeah, every sort of. Well, and because just to give a little more context, this is part of our larger series, Clara, Robert, and Johannes, and I think it's interesting that and basically there was a love triangle between the three. Basically, Robert and Clara were married. Robert sort of discovered Brahms and was his first champion with Brahms. Brahms was a generation younger than them.
Yeah.
And then eventually, and sort of took him in on his own. They became all very close friends. Robert eventually went mad.
Right.
Got committed and died, and left Clara widowed. And so after that, Brahms, both as a sort of sense of loyalty to Robert, feeling like he owed Robert, and also because of his affection for Clara, became sort of like a surrogate man around the house, watching after the kids, financially supporting.
Isn't it interesting? I mean, Schumann also had he lived his life in threes, I suppose. I mean, you look at his life and he had the three personalities that he used to write for. Yeah. And then there's this house of three people. Yeah. There's sort of this thing about him.
Yeah, that kind of makes it's about, I guess it's sort of like, there's that sense of dichotomies of like these sort of these extremes, and then the thing in the middle.
Right, and even in the songs, you've got the three rings.
Yeah, I guess three is
it's the magic number.
Yeah, exactly. But
the old schoolhouse rock.
Exactly. So that, and then I think Brahms' style changed because basically Brahms had this sort of lifelong love of Clara, but there was sort of the sort of ghost of Robert sort of kept them apart. He wouldn't dare touch her because he felt like he would be betraying Robert, and Clara stayed loyal to Robert his whole life. So the later Brahms becomes much more, especially the songs, become much more about sort of emotional restraint. And that's kind of what, and I think the solo music, and all in the chamber music, all of Brahms' music in the later period becomes all about emotional restraint, almost classicism. But this is true blue blood, young, romanticness.
But even still, that sort of honorable chastity is still there, even in these poems.
Exactly.
And the fact that this hero is going out of his way for this one woman, he fights off all other advances. I mean, we see that most highly in number 13 in the cycle, Sulima.
Exactly.
I mean, this guy is cream of the crop. I'm for one woman, and this woman is mine. And so I guess maybe in some ways that's Brahms all the way through. It's just a different picture of each as he gets older.
That does make sense. Or it's sort of that, the sort of the balance shifts. And I think that sort of, I mean, I guess I'm not old yet.
Cheers!
I have gray hairs enough as it is.
Me too.
But there's probably, I get the sense, especially just seeing people, like characters, you can look at it both from the point of view of a composer's personality and their sort of compositional style as they evolve. It's sort of like all the sort of elements of their persona are latent in their whole life, and as they go through life and have different experiences, certain elements come to the forefront, but they're all sort of there. So you're right, that's a good point, that there probably was always this sort of sense of restraint and chastity and kind of yearning in Brahms, and because of his experience with Clara, and it's just his life, he never married, he was a lifelong bachelor, and all of that, so that element came out in his music and in his personality. I remember seeing, someone showed me pictures of Brahms's apartment where he lived when he was older.
Oh, wow.
And the apartment was like about the size from like that table.
The table the
to like
camera's
the
on.
end of the piano. Maybe.
That's bigger than my first apartment here.
It was like it was a hobbit hole.
Yeah, right.
And I think that that was, and he had a little desk to compose at, like, and the ceiling was like weirdly low.
Oh man.
So it was like that sort of, for a composer who's so like lush and rich musically,
Right.
to have that kind of restraint.
Well, no wonder nature was so important to him.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's why he likes getting out.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want to stay in that hole either.
Exactly. Well, so getting more to specifically this cycle, Dishon and Magalona.
Yeah.
What would you say is your favorite song of the 15? If you had to pick one, and you had to say this is the only one you're allowed to sing forever and ever.
Oh man, forever and ever. I mean, that's so hard in this cycle. I mean, I could tell you which ones I don't like as much, but I would say if you said, Dominic, you're only going to sing one of these songs ever again, which one is it going to be?
Yeah.
If it were just for me to choose and
yeah.
it wasn't like me thinking about the audience, I suppose number 9 would probably be the one I would pick.
The lullaby.
The lullaby. It's the most beautiful piece. It's got the most lush texture in the middle, but then it's also so delicate and small and so loving, and it just is. It's always been something that meant a lot to me. That number 9. Yeah, it's great. Sadly, we won't be doing that one. It will be for John Brancy to do that.
We'll have to do it someday.
Well, we'll hopefully do the whole full cycle. Yeah. I mean, this is an interesting thing to me. Doing this time because it's the first time I'm doing it with another singer and another pianist. And it'll be an interesting experience to see.
I'm curious. I sort of did this by recommendation. Brian Ziegler sort of
of course,
recommended it, and I guess I felt like if there was any time to try it, it would be this, because it's sort of in the spirit of how Brooklyn Arts and Society concerts are.
Right.
Anyways, they're always not featuring one particular singer or pianist. It's always sort of a feeling of collective.
It's a collaborative collaboration.
Yeah, exactly. And so it sort of made, so I was like, we'll see how it goes. I do think that it's not a song cycle that's a single narrative from one.
That's very true. There are going to be several voices that come in and out.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's not like I think you can make an argument that like splitting up Winterreise is sacrilege.
Well, no, that's not. That's been done before too. And in fact, Brian Ziegler and I did that with him in Ravinia, where we did it with 5 singers, and it worked very nicely. I mean, but you're right. I mean, there's some things that they make it a different experience, and this will be a different experience as well. But that doesn't mean it's a wrong experience. Well, I think it will be very interesting. The only part that I think about is, I'm gonna miss that song.
Yeah,
like number 9. But
that's the hard.
At the same time, it will be wonderful to hear John.
But in music, you actually get to just sit and enjoy that song. You don't
that's
have to be
absolutely
worrying
true.
about your words. Or
absolutely true.
Yes. Got a line. You just get to like hang out while someone else.
And listen to this beautiful music.
So there are worse fates.
There are. Indeed.
But yeah, I think that this cycle also has. It's actually I keep calling it a cycle, but Brahms didn't write it as a song cycle. He just wrote it as a collection of songs.
Well, some would say that, Brahms never wrote an opera. Some would say that this is the closest thing Brahms ever did to an opera. Because there is a through line, obviously, there is a narrative, but it's not so much a cycle because you can, but it doesn't work as nicely if you take out the text in between. Yeah, which brings us, I was actually going to just bring up that. I thought I would segue for you. Yeah, thank you. Did me solid. Anytime. We're going to... So we're doing this text with, basically there's a novella by Tieck. Yeah.
Ludwig Tieck. And really, when I just tried to...
It's Von Tieck.
Von Tieck.
With apologies to the Tieck family.
Yes, I'll be getting a letter.
We paid handsomely for that font. Please remember it.
Exactly. But I guess when I try to describe, especially when I try to describe this to someone who doesn't really have like a classical music contact, the way I describe it is like, those like romance novels with Fabio on the cover?
That's right.
It's kind of the 19th century equivalent of that. It's a pretty, for lack of a better word, trashy story, in that it's just like, there's, it's just sort of it's kind of incoherent. You know, like a bird comes and like steals his rings and just flies away, and he like
that raven.
And he literally chases the bird across his ocean
right.
to like the Holy Land.
That's right.
Like, and he like, you know, he fights pirates, and there's like an archery contest, and it's just a ridiculous, and it's a ridiculous story, and people are just like, you know, it almost, what's that movie with like, I'm da-da-da, prepare to die, you killed my father?
Oh, Princess Bride, yes, it's very similar to that, absolutely.
Sort of like a fairy tale.
Yes, it's a fairy tale.
But I think that's nice, and probably, that's why I think the sort of operatic sense of it is, it's a highly dramatized story.
Absolutely.
That's being told, not all like a subtle psychological one.
No, not at all. It's clearly a narrative. It's not internal. It's very external.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can look at it more internally and occasionally, but really, it never is. I mean, everybody says what they mean and they mean what they say.
Yeah.
There's nobody lying or anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think, well, I'm really glad of Ty Jones, the actor we got, who's a Shakespearean actor. He's in charge of the Classical Theater of Harlem.
Wow.
Is his you know, his project. And, you know, when we talked about it, I really said, you know, I asked him to sort of really perform it.
Yeah.
Not just be like up there with the papers doing a reading to fill out. I said, like, you're the, and it was good that you added that we are from Texas, because I said, you're the fifth performer. You're not just filling in some.
It's absolutely true, and that story actually provides so much color to the songs. I mean, without that story, and I've done it with and without.
Yeah.
But with that story, it really takes on another life.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's such. I mean, some people might call it cheesy. I happen to like cheese, so I don't mind that. But at the same time, it's so wonderfully rich. Everything is so great, and there's so much symbolism. I mean, if you were to go into it and look at the details of the symbolism, I mean, there's so much.
Yeah. Well, it's a medieval story.
Yes.
And that was all about, you know, like, the equivalent is sort of like the stained glass in cathedrals from that time, where everything, you know, there's that really rich history, especially in sort of Lutheran Germany, of all the images being these sort of like having the second meaning, or like people holding certain flowers,
right,
and all that thing, and like things, and that translates into a lot of song. You know, when songs are about certain flowers or certain images, it's not just like, hey, look at this flower. There's that whole story that everyone would have known back then.
Well, you look at something like song number 8, which is basically about Peter of Provence, who is the main character of the story, who's in love with Die schöne Magalona, the beautiful Magalona. He has a harp because he's a musician.
Yeah.
And in song 8, he says, I have to give up my harp, and I have to pick up this lance because I have to fight for the woman I love. And that's right before they've run off together. And you know, you can look at so many things about what does that harp really mean.
Yeah.
What does playing your own harp really mean? And picking up a lance. I mean, there are so many things you can go into.
Yeah, and it's pretty. I mean, art song gets a bad rap of being a little effeminate sometimes, and you know, so most song cycles are like, I'm so sad my girlfriend left me, I'm gonna wander in the cold, or
yeah, good 3 or 4 like that one.
I'm so sad my girlfriend left me, I'm gonna go sit by this brook.
Yeah.
Or like, I'm so sad my girlfriend left me, why is this flower talking to me?
and this one actually has some of those songs too.
Yeah.
Towards the end.
But it also has like the song like, I'm gonna shoot you in the face with an arrow, and like, I'm gonna fight pirates, and like,
I'm gonna push my way through this water in this storm.
Yeah,
I'll get you.
It's definitely the most machismo song of the big song cycles. It has the more that's sort of brawny and muscular about the music.
Right. It would be quite interesting for people to think of Fabio throughout this entire song cycle. I hope you don't, but I can see it happening.
We've ruined it. No, we'll do it. And actually, well, maybe we should all perform the song cycle shirtless. That will.
Yeah, well, that'll create. We're all so Fabio-esque.
Maybe only John Francis should do
it. Yeah, okay. Bear a hunk in the house, sure.
Yeah, exactly. So my last topic of discussion for you before I tap out here.
All right.
Is Brahms. He is probably one of the. He wrote a tremendous amount for the voice.
Yes.
But as you said, no opera.
Right.
So because he never wrote operatically, I feel like he is a composer who treats the voice in a sort of unique way. What would you say it's like how does singing Brahms compare to singing other composers? How it sits in the voice, etc.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I've done some Brahms, but mainly the Brahms I've done is this set. And speaking of this particular piece, I think the interesting thing about it for the voice is that it's very middle voicey, which is fine. I love it. The reason I love it so much is because in the middle voice, particularly for me, I think for John Brancy as well, being a baritone, you're able to play so much with the text because you're able to do so many different things color-wise.
Yeah.
And I think, operatically, you look at something like Wagner or something like this, you're going to have different boundaries set on you because you're trying to get it out over the orchestra, you're trying to get it out into the house, you're trying to make that sound. Whereas with art song, in general, you have way more choices with color, with text, with and that's by design, I think. I think without that, something like Stichsteliebe or something like Winterreise become, or something like Die Schöne Magelone becomes something else. And opera is opera and art song is art song, but thankfully there are some of these bigger song cycles that operatic voices can sing with a lot of their vocal heft, but still make the choices that they would make in something more delicate.
Exactly. I think my observation of Brahms' vocal writing is they're very, he doesn't set it sort of, it's almost like wherever like the high note is not, the way in a Verdi aria would be like, here's the high note's coming, that high note, here's the high note, is he going to hit the high note, and then it's over.
That's right.
He doesn't think that way vocally, like, he thinks much, you're right, I think that's a good observation that it's very middle voice. He sees the voice as a tool to express something rather than end to itself, the way that sometimes an opera composer, especially those bel canto composers, see the voice as the end to itself, like, having the voice do what the voice can do is the beginning, middle, end of what?
It's an Olympic act.
Yeah, what's going on.
Versus, I don't know, versus what? And opera is more of an Olympic act than this, but this is more, what am I trying to say? I've had too much. Rather than Olympic, it's more mental, cerebral, that's the word I was looking for, thank you.
Yeah, it's more, because Brahms wrote, Brahms is the composer who wrote the most number of art songs after, especially as percentage of his total output, since Schubert really. Schumann wrote a lot, but Brahms wrote even more. I think even more than that. And also, I think it's really interesting that when you look at the opus numbers of Brahms, art song is the only genre that Brahms consistently wrote from the beginning, like the first song opus is like opus 2 or 3. No, I think it's opus 3. Okay. And the last thing he wrote was 4 serious songs. And completely consistently. Because basically, Brahms wrote his symphonies, didn't start writing his symphonies till he was like, I think the first symphony is opus 80 something. Wow. And then they were already like the last one's opus 90 something. So it's like very small. His 3 violin sonatas was like opus 78, 100, and 100 something.
It's almost like the art song was his practice for all these heavier things.
Yeah, well, and he's also the only composer besides Schubert that incorporates his songs into his instrumental music to the same degree that Schubert did. Schubert has the Trout Quintet. Sure. And there are a whole, there's a movement of a violin sonata that's just a song but the violin's playing more. But then there's V Melodien is in another. I think there's some stuff in the lullaby is in the Second Symphony. Right. And everyone goes, hey, this lullaby is quoting the Second Symphony. And I was like, no, this is not how it wrote. That's right. But, yeah, so I think it's weird that Brahms basically is seen as an instrumental composer. He's seen as like the chamber music composer, right? The serious symphonic. But I think he really saw himself as an art song composer, and I guess he did some other stuff too.
Sure.
Just by sheer quantity of music.
Yeah.
So I think that he really, and he's also, I think, very ironically seen as the pure, like, abstract art composer.
Really?
Like, you know, the sort of heir apparent of Beethoven and the string quartet that has no program and has no storytelling. It's just the relationship of the notes, and he gets put in the. But he was so text oriented.
Absolutely.
He was so, you know, sensitive and about setting text and having the music respond very directly to text. That. It just seems like and it changes how you play the instrumental music when you know the songs.
And what a wonderful example is this piece. I mean, you look at all the stuff that he does color-wise. I mean, I'm just thinking about. I mean, you think about 8, you think about 9, you think about any of these. 10. I mean, you hear the storm.
Yeah.
In 9, you hear the bees buzzing around. I mean, he uses the text to make the music.
It's very, and he's almost like, you know, I can think of many, like, well, I think of 8. The harp is literally. The harp is in the piano part, and in 4 there's there's sort of like the ribbons of his tears is the ribbons of the Pacciatoris.
Or the wind, or in number 2 you can hear the trumpets playing as he's going down the jousting.
Yeah, it's very. Yeah. And I always thought I always think that this sort of dichotomy in pure abstract music and sort of, for whatever reason, lesser programmatic music, either in opera or art song or music associated with theater. I always thought that was just an extremely dumb dichotomy that was made for no apparent reason. You know, that some music is Bach. I think Bach. Another example of this is Bach, in that Bach is seen as the ultimate abstract contrapuntal, purist. But Bach invented tone painting the way that it's understood, that led to art song and all his cantata. You know, every time the word high is sung in a cantata, it's the highest note. It's so literal and it's so painted.
Well, and ultimately, that's the whole point of music, is it's communicating without text, but that doesn't mean meaning goes away.
Yeah.
You know, even in these abstract things, there's got to be something being said, even if it happens to be nothing.
Yeah.
There's something being said, and the composer is coloring it the way that he or she wants to, so that text or idea is presented with that.
Yeah, I think a good way to think of it, to me, in my mind, I feel like all music has a text. It's just, are you getting the text up front with the music, or is the text subtext? Is it, it's not like, I think always in Mozart, when you listen to, even his symphonies and his string quartets, he's thinking operatically, and then that means, if you're thinking operatically, that means there's a story. And if the story is, and the story is something, it's not nothing.
Exactly.
And maybe it's not a very completely predetermined specific thing.
Yeah.
But it's something.
It's texture.
Yeah.
Texture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good place. Even though we just poured one wine, we'll finish this.
Well, we can finish it off camera. You don't have to be here.
Exactly. But just a reminder, December 1st, you should come to the Brooklyn Public Library. It's right off the 2-3 at Grand Army Plaza. It's a free concert. It's at 4 p.m. Brahms, Shorter Maglona, Dominic and myself. Peter Dugan on piano with John Brancy and the fabulous actor Ty Jones. We strongly suggest you show up at 3:30 on Sunday if you're going to come, because they don't guarantee seats. And
how many seats are there?
I think 100 and something.
Oh, great!
But
I hope it's full.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be full because I think they bus people in and stuff like that from senior centers. So you should come check us out at www.brooklynartsongsociety.org. Our Twitter feed is Brooklyn Art Song. You can like us on Facebook. And if you want to buy tickets to any of our other concerts, they're all on sale at brownpapertickets.com. Until there's more song and wine, I'll see you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.